Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Jews had requested they want to send scouts to scout out the land. As it mentioned the Midrash, Moshe himself, if it was a question, is it conquerable or not, he wouldn't consider it at all. And they understood that. Because Hashem says, definitely it is, there's no question. Are you questioning God himself? But rather, he said, as I mentioned yesterday, they're concerned about Achil Hashem, because the Canaanim, they'll hide all the wealth. When we come into the houses, we'll find empty houses. So by scouting out the land, seeing where they're hiding all their treasures, it'll prevent this Chil Hashem from taking place. But the simple understanding, as we said, according to the Ramban, that we had a standing army from the age of 20 and above, the males, they were counted, because there's a principle known as Ein Somchen Al Hanes, we don't rely on miracles. Identically, when you're going to conquer a country, although Hashem says you will succeed, we don't rely on miracles. We do what we can. So you scout out the land first to see, when you enter the land, what are the weak points, and you have strategies how you're going to conquer the land. If there are issues which maybe seem to be you can't contend with those issues, that you don't have to worry. You've done yours. Hashem will make sure that you succeed. That's what they're asking for the scouts. Therefore, Moshe considered their request and he put it to Hashem. And Hashem says, Shlach l'cha anoshim. So take a look in Rashi. Shlach l'datcho. Ani eini mitzavaloch. I'm not commanding you to send scouts. If tirtzeh shlach, if you want to, you can. I'm not opposed to it. The Jews came and they made a request. We'd like to send men before us to scout out the land. As it says, beginning of Dvarim, when Moshe Rabbeinu now reviews the 40 years before he passes away, in the last 36 days of his life, admonishing them, reprimanding them for all their failings. Moshe consulted with the Shekhinah, with the divine presence of it. Hashem says to Moshe, I said, it's a good land. I'll take them from the impoverished state of Egypt to this land which flows with milk and honey. Now, this is important. I will give them a setting which they will misunderstand it. It'll be a basis for them to misjudge. As a result of Meraglim, so they should not inherit it. They will see things there and process them in a way that they should not inherit it. I'll give them mokum litos, because the request is a unacceptable request. Because I already said it is what it is, and yet they question me. Therefore, as a result of that, I will give mokum litos. When they see what they see, they're going to not see it correctly. We're not talking about the Meraglim only. We're talking about even the people. When the Meraglim came back with the ominous reports, it wasn't simple they would accept it. Because here they believed they were going in, and maybe they had sufficient faith, but because they themselves made that request, where they shouldn't have made, therefore, you're not going to have that level of confidence and security, emunah, to be able to contend with what you hear from the Meraglim, from the spies. You know, we say in Psukei D'Zimra in the morning that Hashem is ma'oded anovim. What's the word in Hebrew? The word idud means you give a person strength. You give him a sense of confidence. You know, a person's humble. Even though he's humble, as humble as he is, you know, you can only take so much abuse. And everybody naturally wants some degree of acknowledgement. Hashem is ma'oded anovim. He gives that inner strength to the humble person to be able to continue to be humble. Because it's not easy. He needs that special intervention of understanding that he should not be worn down by all this trying to be under the radar. He's Modid Anovi. The Gemara in Shabbos quotes a posuk from the Novi, from the prophet, Tzadik be'emunos yechia. The tzaddik, how does he live? What's his secret? Be'emunos yechia. He's able to continue only because he has that level of emunah. He has this unswerving belief in God and faith in Hashem. That's how he lives his life. There's so many issues he has to contend with. He sees many things. Nevertheless, he always has that tunnel vision, so to say, that direct understanding. He doesn't go to the left or to the right. I'd once mentioned in the name of Chaim Volozhino that Kriya Shema is referred to as Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. The word Ol means a yoke. We accept the yoke of heaven. When you think about a yoke, it seems to be, it's a weighty responsibility. Person, you put a yoke on a person, you visualize an animal with a yoke. The animal's forced to work and labor in the capacity that the master puts the animal to plow the field. That's the yoke. So Chaim Volozhin explains it this way. Why do you put a yoke on an ox when it plows the field? What's the reason? When you put the yoke on its head, right behind its head, it secures the head in a way that the head cannot turn to the right or to the left. It can only see direct. Because if the animal is able to look to the right or to the left, and it veers slightly to either side, the blade which is inserted in the ground, which is the blade of the plow, which is, the Gemara says, it's 12 inches in the ground, and as the plow goes and the animal pulls it, it tears the ground. That's how you plow. It tears up the ground. If the animal should veer to the right or to the left, what happens to the blade? The blade breaks in the ground. So the only way you can control the animal that it shouldn't veer to either side, you lock its head, that it can't turn its head at all, not to the right, not to the left. It sees directly. And when it sees directly, it walks that straight line. And walking that straight line, it guarantees the plow doesn't get broken. The blade in the plow doesn't get broken. Ol Malchus Shamayim means that a Jew accepts the dominion of Hashem to such a degree that despite all the distractions, you only see one thing. You only see the will of Hashem. You don't get distracted. When you accept Ol Malchus Shamayim, you're accepting upon yourself. Whatever Hashem does is for your best. Therefore, all these issues, all these questions, don't in any way ruffle your feathers or unseat you from your position to be distracted. That's called Ol Malchus Shamayim. We accept the Ol Malchus Shamayim. Tzaddik be'emunah yechia means that tzaddik, the Navi says, what is his ace in the hole? What's his secret? He lives by his emunah. His emunah is at such a level of reality, it doesn't allow him to see anything, to be distracted. But for that emunah, you need special divine intervention. He always needs that continuous shoring up, that strengthening, because as a human being, humanly, sometimes it's not possible. We have questions, and questions, they gnaw at us. That the question doesn't bother you, that's rooted in your emunah, because you have emunah. I'll give you an example. Years ago, there was a famous, everybody had a question. If you wanted an escape clause, as much as you explain to a person that Hashem, there is such a thing as divine providence continuously, the person would say, what about the Holocaust? What about the Holocaust? How did Hashem allow 6 million Jews to be murdered by the Nazis, 1 million children? That was always the question. So I used to say to some of these people, you were born with a platinum spoon in your mouth. Every day, every year you upgrade your Mercedes. And you go and you this and that. And what bothers you about God is what? It's the Holocaust. Who are you kidding? It's only when you want to somehow push back, you bring up the Holocaust. But that question doesn't bother you. But you're asking a good question. What about the Holocaust? So I always say, if the question is a question, there is no answer, because only God knows. But if you have faith in God and you don't question God's decision, the question is not a question. If the question is not a question, there are many things we don't understand, but it's not a question. I'll ask you about many things in the human body. What does the heart have 4 chambers? Why is this, that? Why? Because that's the way God decided it should be. But why? It's not a question which gnaws at you. It means I don't know. Someday, if God will tell me, I will know. But right now, I don't know. But if you feel you have to know, and I want the answer, then you have a problem, because that question is going to unseat you and destabilize you if you allow it to actually interfere in your life and it's in your mind on a continuous basis, or even not on it. But that to be able not to be deterred and distracted by these, that's siyata deshmaya. That's sadik b'emnusa yechir. Because the Meraglim asked for scouts, which was something inappropriate, because Hashem says to Moshe, I've told him what it is. I'm taking him from the impoverishment of Egypt to a land that flows milk and honey. Everything is good. And now they say to me, but we want to see for ourselves. We want to send scouts. I swear on their lives, when the Meraglim come back, they're going to hear information which will be a basis for them to misunderstand, to be misled, because they don't deserve that siyata d'shmaya, that divine intervention, to give them that sense of understanding that we're going to succeed. As a result of that, they're going to fail. That's the understanding. We find by the Meraglim came back, it was Tisha B'Av at night. And the Jews, they started to cry and bemoan their fate. God is taking us to a land to be destroyed. So the Medrash says, Gemara in Tainus, and Rashi cites it, Atem shel chinam. You've cried a crying which has no basis to cry. There's no reason to cry. And Maldivkos. I will give you what to cry about. The future on Tisha B'Av, the first base of Mikdash was destroyed. The second base of Mikdash was destroyed. There were 5 tragedies. The Mishnah enumerates in Tainus what happened on Tisha B'Av. It was decreed that they should that the generation over 40-year period should perish. The first base, second base of Beitar was destroyed on Tisha B'Av, and the Romans plot on the Yerushalayim. Destroyed everything, any remnant of Yerushalayim on Tisha B'Av. These are the 5 tragedies. If you cry when there's no reason to cry, I'll give you a reason to cry. I'll give you a reason to cry. You have what to cry about. Now, why was the Beis Hamikdash destroyed? So the Gemara tells the first Beis Hamikdash was because of the three cardinal sins. Second Beis Hamikdash was sin aschino. If a person has sufficient clarity and understands things as you should see them and understand them, there are many lines you don't cross. You wouldn't consider crossing certain lines. You do things in a way where you have clarity. But because they didn't do things correctly, as a result of that, they had this lack of clarity, therefore they went off the road. And they went off the cliff. And Hashem said, I've had enough. Second Beis Hamikdash sinaschino, unwarranted hate. Again, it's only due to a lack of clarity. If you would understand what it was, you wouldn't have this unwarranted hate. If there's a basis to have a claim against your fellow is one thing, but even without a basis, there was sin aschino. But that was only due to a lack of clarity. Here you had such clarity in the desert. You saw the 10 Makos. You saw Yitzis Mitzrayim. You saw Kriyas Yamsuf. You saw had Kabbalah Satorah. You had the Mun. You have the bear. You have Danei HaKavod. You have such clarity. How do you somehow put your head in the sand and say, but what's it all about? And that's what Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu. After all they've seen, how do they come up with this kind of understanding that I'm out to destroy them? I'm taking to Canaan to destroy them because it's a land which devours its inhabitants. How did they have such a level of distrust? When I've given them, proven myself endless times over that they could trust me. They could have faith in me. If that's the case, with all this clarity, they don't have faith. In the future, I will not give them that clarity. As a result of that lack of clarity, that's the reason why we tripped up and we had the 5 tragedies take place on Tisha B'Av for that reason. We're saying the Medrash says because they said we want to go in to prevent the Chil Hashem. Because you promised we're going to find houses filled with all kinds of treasures, and we're going to arrive, we're not going to see any treasures. So to head off that Chil Hashem, we'll know exactly where they buried their treasures, and as a result of that, there won't be a Chil Hashem. But yet Moshe Rabbeinu says when they go in, he advised them exactly how they should enter, the weak points, the strong points, how to make an evaluation of how to contend with the enemy, right? So the simple understanding, I would say, 2 separate things. Now that you're going in and ultimately we're conquering, we have to approach it, like we said, in Som Chalal and this. In Som Chalal and this. So therefore, you have to have a strategy exactly how we're going to conquer the land. You find the vulnerable locations, and he gives them indicators. If they live in the walled cities, that means they're not strong. If they live in open cities, that means that they're secure with themselves because that strength, that they're not concerned that they're going to be attacked. So as a result of that, you'll make your evaluation exactly how to approach the enemy. That's a simple understanding. But if you remember, we have by Shemitah, Hashem says the land should remain fallow during the 7th year. Right? And it says, and you will eat the fruit and you will be sated. However, if you can ask a question, man nochal, if we can't plant in the 7th year. And that means we're not going to have, and the produce of the 7th year is ownerless, or we can only first plant the 8th year, and the crop will only be ready right before the 9th year. What are we going to eat? Hashem says, I'll command my blessing that the 6th year crop will be a yield of 3 years. It'll cover you till you're able to reap the 8th year crop. So the Sifarno over there initially says, V'chaltem period l'sova. You'll eat the fruit of the 6th year to be sated. And Rashi says, Chazal, ochel kimim zborach b'meyav. You'll eat a small amount, and the small amount will be the equivalent of the larger amount. But if you ask the question, man ochal, meaning if you don't have sufficient bitochon that Hashem will perform that miracle, that the less is more, and you have to see it in real time, I will give you the bracha that the 6th year will produce a 3-year yield to cover you till you're able to reap the 8th year crop for the 9th year. So if you have bitochon, you'll merit the miracle of what? Ochel kimom sparkum meyav. But if you don't have the level of bitochon, you have to see in real time, then I'll give you the 3-year yield to cover you. Same thing. If you have the faith, you don't even ask the question. I'm in the hands of Hashem, we're going in. You don't need strategies, you need nothing. You go straight in. But now that you're asking the question and you're worried about many things, if that's the case, now we have to have a strategy plan. How do we go in? Now we have to go in as if you're going to conquer. Otherwise, it wouldn't be necessary. But now that you're at this level of not having sufficient faith to rely on Hashem, that you have to be part of the equation, if that's the case, we have to go with the conventional approach, planning a strategy, how you're going to conquer the land. Similar to what the Siforno had said regarding the 3-year yield versus initially, the small amount would have been the equivalent of the greater amount. Olive and Yeshua, they saw exactly what the other 10 saw. But they came back with a whole different story. What they saw, which seemed to be the most ominous, that confirms that Hashem's taking us and we'll succeed. And we're going to have victory. Why? And the other saw just to the contrary. What they saw white, they saw black. If a person has a lack of trust when you start, You're looking for confirmation to confirm to prove this proves my lack of trust. But if you have trust, you don't leave a stone unturned to secure that trust. The 10 Meraglim, they had a lack of trust, which we're explaining in a minute why. So when they went into Canaan, and wherever they turned, they saw people burying their dead. And the only people they saw surviving, not being affected by this, are the giants. They said, you see clearly, this confirms our suspicion. This is a ploy to destroy us. You see, people are dying all over. Kalev and Yeshua, because they had the trust, they had the faith. This is just unbelievable. Were sent in to scout out the land. Hashem brought about a plague that they're so immersed in their grief, they don't even notice us scouting out the land. That we should do a proper evaluation of how to enter this land. So what they saw as the most negative, they saw as the ultimate in the positive. But what was the difference? It's where you start. If you start with trust, or you start with a lack of trust. One says that proves we have why we distrust. This confirms our distrust. The other says just this confirms our trust. Look what Hashem did for us. That's the difference between the two of them. What I tell you, it's just the semblance of it's not the same thing. A person's a tzaddik, and the Gemara tells us one's yearly stipend for earnings is determined from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So if that's the case, why does a person have to take any initiative to earn a living? It's already been predetermined. So the Mesilas Yesharim explains that after the Chet of Adam Rishon, when Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, what was the curse? You will eat bread by the sweat of your brow. Meaning, everything's predetermined. Yearly stipend allocation is in place. However, you have to meet a prerequisite. It's called you have to sweat for it. If you meet the prerequisite of the sweat of your brow, then Hashem releases it to you. Otherwise, he doesn't release it. Now, everybody has a different degree of sweat. You have a person's a tzaddik. Tzaddik. How does he want to invest his life? He wants to invest his life to serve Hashem as much as he can. Any level of distraction from that, he has to work an hour a day. That hour is what is Esapecha. For him, that's by the sweat of his brow. He doesn't want to be on the golf green. He doesn't want to be on the vacation. He wants to be fully involved in doing mitzvahs. That's where he wants to be. Therefore, to a lesser degree, the famous story of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, what was his shtadlus? Once a year, he'd buy an Austrian sweepstake ticket. That's what he did. Didn't do more than that. And somehow, the year always worked out. Things came together. He had all his needs covered. Because for Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, he didn't have to do more than that. That was his initiative. That he went and he spent the money to buy the sweepstake ticket. Others, you have to spend 8 hours in the store. Others need more than that. It's all based on one's faith, based on the way you see it. How much do I have to invest to get it? Where do I want to be? That will determine what the sweat of your brow is. That's how it's determined. So you go to this person who's the greater tzaddik, and you ask him, and I once told over the story with the Chofetz Chaim, in Europe, where Jews were lived in ghettos, and they were crowded in, and they lived in these wooden structures. And if there was ever a fire in a Jewish community, the moment the fire broke out, people ran for their lives. Because the community went up, within an hour, there was no longer a community. The fire went from house to house, and the wood being old and dry, you ran with your personal belongings and for your life. So there was a community, a village that burnt down. Chofetz Chaim went to try to help them raise money because winter was coming and they'd be exposed to the elements. So he went to a very wealthy Jew who lived in a stone mansion, and he would be able to alleviate their plight. And he asked them to participate. He says he's not interested. So the Chofetz Chaim says to him, how can you not be interested? Your brothers, your brethren are exposed to the elements, they're suffering. and you're able to make a difference. How do you not want to make a difference? He says, I earned the money is mine, I have right to do whatever I want to do with my money. That's what he says to Chofetz Chaim. So Chofetz Chaim says, don't you realize God gave you that money to be able to be responsible, to assume financial responsibility for your brothers when there is this type of need. He says, the money's my money. I'm not a treasurer. It's my money. I do what I want. I choose not to participate in this. That's what he says to Chofetz Chaim. So Chofetz Chaim says, a Jew is not supposed to speak the way you're speaking. He says, you realize God to take whatever you have in a moment. So maybe see it correctly and do what you should do. He says, I'm so diversified. If I lose one, I'm covered. No problem. I'm not worried. There's no way I could lose all my wealth. I'm secure. That's what he says to Chofetz Chaim. Chofetz Chaim says, you may regret those words. Okay. About 2 weeks later, the Russian army was coming through his area, and this man owned the town. He owned the bridge. He owned all the properties there. The Russian general, he dismounts and he's leading his troops through the town. And as he walks over the bridge, one of the knots in the wood, in the planks, was pushed out, and the spur of his boot got caught in that hole, twists his ankle, breaks his ankle. So the Russians were known rabid anti-Semites, but if they have a reason to be enraged and act in this most extreme way, it doesn't take much to set them off. Right away, he wants to know who owns this bridge, who is irresponsible, did not maintain the bridge as he should have. They find out it's this character. Immediately, what do? They send him off to Siberia. That's the end of the story. In 1 second, he lost everything. Chofetz Chaim says, that's not the way you speak. It's given to you for a reason to do what you're supposed to do. There's no such thing as it's mine. That's the way it is. So now, the tzaddik, you ask him, do you want to support a cause, a Torah cause? Do you want to support the poor? And he says, I'm more than happy. You go to the other guy who spends 8 hours on the golf green, where he has a whole different perception of what the reality is. I'm a self-made man. And the tzaddik says, I'm more than happy to give help. The other man says, no, I don't want. So you say to that man, how do you not? You have such success. Don't you think God gave you that success, that you should do what you should be doing? This is only God gave it to me. He says, do you know this success? I'm a workaholic. I haven't seen my kids since they were born. Now that I finally succeed, I have time to spend time after they graduated college. So you tell me, God gave it to me. This wealth cost me a pound of flesh. That's what he says. Therefore, he locks down. The tzaddik is more than happy. Why? The tzaddik, when he succeeds, everything's a miracle. He did nothing, and Hashem gives him whatever he needs. This other guy, it cost him his family, it cost him his kids. That's the cost of the success. And he says, you're telling me God gave it to me. Therefore, the other person resists, and the tzaddik more than happily, because he says it's a gift. Everything is a gift of Hashem. That's tzaddik b'moshe yichya, because the tzaddik sees it through a different lens, and it comes easily to him, relatively speaking. He could be immersed in what he's doing, and he needs a minimum of effort to bring about the other. It's a gift. He sees it clearly. It's a gift of Hashem. The other person who doesn't live but b'emunaso, he lives through his own initiative. Everything's attributed to that. Not so simple. He sees it through a different lens. Don't tell me how to spend my money. And as a result of that, he resists, and he doesn't have the schus to give what he should give because he sees it wrong.